Okay, let's unpack this. Today, we're embarking on a deep dive into a topic as vast and ancient as civilization itself, the incredible world of Indian philosophical traditions. Our mission for this deep dive is really to explore how these profound systems of thought were classified, how they evolved over time, and maybe what surprising insights they offer. Insights into knowledge, existence, even our modern understanding of science. Our source for this journey is a fascinating exploration of the native philosophical traditions of India.
And what's truly fascinating right from the start is how Indian philosophy really stands apart. It's got this unique, seamless integration of philosophy, science, and theology.
Seamless, unlike in the West, you mean?
Exactly. Unlike the Western world, where, historically you often saw these sort of thick walls emerge between these disciplines, Indian systems maintained a really holistic approach from the very beginning.
So it was always seen as an integral whole.
Yes, seeking truth, understanding the cosmos, spiritual practice, it was all part of the same quest, really.
That holistic view itself is quite something. But when we talk about Indian philosophy, we're looking at a truly enormous breadth and depth, aren't we? It's rooted in several major native religious traditions.
Oh, absolutely enormous.
Yeah.
The four major native religions of India, Hinduism, Jainism, Buddhism, and Sikhism, they each possess these incredibly rich philosophical traditions. Some go back thousands of years.
Hinduism being the oldest and largest?
That's right. Hinduism is the largest and oldest. Jainism also has this ancient antiquity, then Buddhism and Sikhism following. And just to give you a sense of the scale, you place these Indian philosophies in the broader global context, alongside other major traditions like Confucianism, Taoism, Zoroastrianism, and the Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Christianity, Islam. Each of those, of course, has its own vast subdivisions, too.
Right. So this is such a monumental body of thought, it makes you wonder, how did ancient scholars even begin to classify it all, to get a handle on it?
That's a great question. What were the earliest ways they tried to categorize these diverse philosophies? Traditionally, scholars classify Indian philosophies under two main buckets, initially at least.
Okay.
The first big division is based on Vedic authority. This gives you the categories of Astika and Nastika schools.
Astika and Nastika. So Astika means believing in the Vedas, and Nastika means not believing.
Yeah, originally that was the core meaning. Astika meant sort of affirming the authority, the existence, if you will, of the Vedas as revelation. Nastika meant denying that authority.
Seems straightforward enough.
Well, it is, but then there's another interpretation that sometimes pops up, though it's debated. It links Astika more to believing in God, like Ishvaravada, and Nastika to not believing in God, Nirishvaravada. There are even some sort of hybrid agnostic versions within these schools, too.
Ah, okay, so it wasn't always just about the Vedas.
The primary classical distinction really hinged on Vedic authority. You see texts like the Maimonides emphasizing the importance of the Astika view, for instance. But the God question adds another layer. And beyond just that Astika-Nastika split, you also have these early doxographical accounts.
Doxographical, what are those exactly?
They're basically texts that classify and account for the existing philosophies of the time. Think of them as like the first attempts to map out the philosophical landscape.
Okay, like catalogs.
Exactly. For example, there's a classical epic called Manimekalai. It's ancient, and it describes 6 major classifications. The materialistic Lokayata school, also called Charvaka, then Buddha, Sankhya, Nyaya, Vaisheshika, and Mimamsa.
Interesting. So even back then, they were trying to group these diverse ideas.
Precisely. And
Yeah.
similarly, you have Haribhadra, who was a Jain monk.
Mhm.
In his work, the Shatadarshana Samukhaya, he offers another doxographical account. He lists Buddhist, Nyaya, Sankhya, Jaina, Vaisheshika, and Jaimini Mimamsa schools. It shows how these systems were seen in relation to each other.
So those early classifications give us a glimpse, a kind of snapshot. But I understand there's a more standardized way that Indian philosophy, particularly the Astika side, has traditionally been categorized, one that became more widely accepted.
Yes, absolutely. This standard classification of the Astika, or orthodox philosophies, revolves around the 6 Vedic philosophies. They're famously known as the Shad Darshanas.
Shad Darsanas, 6 schools.
That's right. And they're often paired up because they share certain commonalities or focus areas, forming 3 key pairs.
Okay, let's break those down. What's the first pair?
So the first pair is Nyaya and Vaisheshika. Nyaya is really renowned. It's one of the earliest recorded schools of logic anywhere in the world. It's all about epistemology, how we know what we know, the means of valid knowledge, rules of debate.
Wow, ancient logic. That's fundamental.
Incredibly fundamental. And its partner, Vaishika, is recognized as one of the oldest ontological philosophies. Ontology being the study of being, of what exists. Vaisheshika tries to categorize everything in reality.
So how we know things and what things are. Makes sense they'd be paired.
Exactly. They complement each other, the tools for knowing and the things to be known. They're often clubbed together for that reason.
Okay, that's the first pair. What's the second?
The second pair is Sankhya and Yoga. Sankhya is considered one of the oldest formally founded philosophical schools. Its impact is, well, profound. You feel its influence across almost all schools of Indian philosophy, including really popular ones like Vedanta and Siddhanta.
What's the core idea of Sankhya?
It's fundamentally dualistic. It posits two ultimate realities: Purusha, which is pure consciousness, unchanging and multiple, and Prakriti, which is primordial matter or nature, the source of everything manifest. Interestingly, Sankhya itself actually has both a theological flavor, Ishvaravada, and a non-theological, or perhaps more accurately, agnostic flavor, Nirishvarada.
So consciousness versus matter. How does yoga fit in with that?
Well, yoga, its counterpart, is often seen as the practical application of Sankhya's theory. It's famously associated with Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, which delve deep into the psychological and meditative aspects.
Right, not just the physical postures we often think of today.
Not at all. The sutras are about controlling the fluctuations of the mind, Citta-vritti nirodha, to ultimately achieve discrimination between Purusha and Prakriti, leading to liberation. Sankhya provides the map, yoga provides the practical path. And of course, there are other significant schools of yoga beyond Patanjali, like Hatha Yoga, Raja Yoga, Kundalini Yoga, each with its own methods.
Theory and practice again. Makes sense. Okay, so that's Nyaya Vaisheshika and Sankhya Yoga. What's the third pair of the Shad-darshanas?
The final pair is Purva Mimamsa and Uttara Mimamsa, which is also known as Vedanta. These two schools are very, very tightly coupled with the Vedic texts themselves.
How so?
Well, Purva Mimamsa, sometimes just called Mimamsa, focuses primarily on the Karma Kanda. That's the earlier part of the Vedic corpus, the section dealing with rituals, duties, principles, and practices. It's about understanding the injunctive statements of the Vedas and performing the prescribed actions correctly.
So the action part of the Vedas.
Right. It emphasizes Dharma through ritual action. And then you have Uttara Mimamsa, universally known as Vedanta. This school focuses on the Jnana Kanda, the later part of the Vedas, especially the Upanishads, which are all about knowledge and wisdom.
Jnana Kanda, the knowledge part.
Exactly. That literally means the end of the Veda Anta. Textually, it refers to the Upanishads at the end of the Vedic corpus, but spiritually, it signifies the highest wisdom or the culmination of Vedic knowledge, the path leading to moksha, liberation.
And Vedanta itself is huge, right? With sub-schools.
Oh, immensely rich.
Right.
Vedanta branches out into numerous influential sub-schools. You have Advaita Vedanta, famously associated with Shankara, positing non-dualism, the ultimate identity of the individual soul, Atman, and the ultimate reality, Brahman.
The idea that all is one.
In essence, yes. But then you also have Vishishtadvaita, qualified non-dualism, associated with Ramanuja, and Dvaita, dualism, associated with Madhva, among others. Each offers a different perspective on the relationship between the individual, God, and the world. And it doesn't stop there. There are even newer forms, often called Neo-Vedanta, like the schools inspired by Ramakrishna or Sri Aurobindo, which adapt and modernize traditional Vedantic ideas for contemporary times.
Wow, that's quite a spectrum within just the orthodox schools. But the philosophical landscape isn't limited to just these 6 Vedic schools, is it? Weren't there other traditions developing alongside them?
Absolutely correct. Alongside and sometimes interwoven with the Vedic traditions, you have the Agamic or Tantric traditions. These possess their own vast body of literature, the Agamas and Tantras.
And these also claim divine origin.
They do, yes, though often linked to specific theological personalities or deities rather than the impersonal Veda. Philosophically, they often explore different paths to liberation, sometimes emphasizing esoteric practices, mantra, yantra, and the divine feminine energy, Shakti. You can broadly see 3 major branches here. Shaivism, where Lord Shiva is seen as the highest divinity. Shaktism, where the goddess, Shakti in her various forms, is considered supreme. And Vaishnavism, where Lord Mahavishnu is the highest divinity.
So different supreme deities, different paths.
Different focuses, certainly. And a key concept in many of these traditions is how wisdom flows down, sometimes called Shaktiyata, like a descent of wisdom or grace from the chosen deity. It adds another layer to how knowledge and liberation are conceived.
Okay, so we have the Astika schools acknowledging the Vedas and the Agamic traditions with their own divine sources. That brings us back to the other side of that initial divide, The Gnostica schools.
Exactly. The Gnostic schools, the heterodox traditions, are defined by their non-acceptance of Vedic authority.
And the most prominent one are still around today, right?
Very much so. The most important and influential Gnostic schools, still living traditions practiced by millions, are Buddhism and Jainism.
Two major world religions in their own right.
Absolutely. Buddhism, originating with Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, branched out significantly. You have the major streams like Hinayana, which include schools like Theravada and Mahasangika, then Mahayana and Vajrayana. Each has its own complex philosophical developments and sub-branches, spreading far beyond India.
And Jainism.
Jainism, tracing its roots back to Mahavira and even earlier Tirthankaras, is primarily divided into two main sub-schools today. The Digambaras, meaning sky-clad or naked, and the Svetambaras, meaning white-clad. Both emphasize ahimsa, nonviolence, and asceticism quite strongly.
We also mentioned Charvaka earlier.
Yes, Charvaka, also known as Lokayata, a fascinating school because it was purely materialistic. It rejected supernatural concepts, inference as a means of knowledge, and basically asserted that perception was the only valid source of knowledge and sensual pleasure, the main goal of life.
A radical view for its time.
Extremely. And we should also briefly mention the Ajivika school. It was another ancient Shramanic tradition, contemporaneous with early Buddhism and Jainism, known for its doctrine of nadi or absolute determinism, fate, though it eventually died out.
It's just astounding, the sheer volume and complexity, which leads to the question, how was all this knowledge, these intricate arguments, vast texts, subtle distinctions, how was it preserved and transmitted over millennia, especially before writing became widespread?
That really is remarkable, isn't it? It speaks volumes about the intellectual culture.
Mm.
Initially, the earliest wisdom, particularly the Vedic hymns, was transmitted purely orally, through Shruti, which literally means that which is heard.
Just word of mouth. Guru to student.
Exactly. An unbroken chain, Guru Shishya Parampara. And to make this vast knowledge manageable, memorable, and transmissible, it was often condensed into incredibly concise aphorisms known as sutras.
Sutras, like short, potent phrases.
Precisely. Think of them as dense nuggets of thought. Almost like, well, you know how Einstein's complex theory of relativity can be represented by EMCIs, a simple formula holding vast meaning. Sutras served a similar mnemonic and conceptual purpose for complex philosophical ideas.
That's a great analogy. But sutras are so concise they must require interpretation, right?
Absolutely. And this is another key feature. Unlike some traditions where questioning or reinterpreting sacred texts might be discouraged, in India, a hugely rich tradition of commentarial literature flourished. This was crucial.
Commentaries upon commentaries.
Yes, you have multiple levels. There are bhashyas, which are detailed, authoritative commentaries on the sutras. Then vrittis, which are shorter glosses or explanations. And vartikas, which are critical notes examining, supporting, or even challenging points made in the bhashyas.
So interpretation wasn't just allowed, it was actively encouraged.
It was central to the tradition. This fostered intellectual vibrancy. It allowed different sub-schools to emerge within the broader frameworks, each aligning with their own line of commentators and interpretations. It kept the philosophies living and evolving. And this naturally led to what's sometimes called the philosophical polemical epoch. Schools didn't just exist in isolation. They actively engaged in rigorous debates, known as tarka. Sometimes quite heated arguments, actually.
Intellectual battles?
You could say that. This constant debate and argumentation became a vital mechanism. It wasn't just about proving rivals wrong. It was about refining their own positions, clarifying concepts, preserving knowledge accurately, and really intellectualizing the entire theological and philosophical enterprise.
That makes sense. It forces clarity and rigor. Looking back, can we see distinct periods in how this whole landscape evolved?
We can, broadly speaking. You start with the early Vedic and Brahmanical thought period, running parallel with the rise of the Shramanic traditions like Jainism and Buddhism. Then you move into the classical period, maybe around the early century CE, where the Shad Darshanas really formalized their systems, and various Buddhist schools like Madhyamaka and Yogacara developed complex philosophies.
And after the classical period?
Then comes the medieval period. This saw the further expansion and elaboration of these schools. Major commentators like Shankara, Ramanuja, Madhva shaping Vedanta. And crucially, the rise of the immensely influential Bhakti movement.
Bhakti, the path of devotion.
Exactly. This represented a significant paradigm shift. Intense personal devotion to God, whether Shiva, Vishnu, Shakti, or other forms, became a powerful mainstream channel for spiritual experience and realization. often expressed through poetry, music, and bypassing some of the complex intellectualism of the philosophical schools, making spiritual insights more accessible.
And this evolution continued into modern times.
Absolutely. The journey carries on into the modern and contemporary periods. You see movements like Neo-Vedanta trying to synthesize ancient wisdom with modern thought. The Hindu Renaissance saw figures like Raja Ram Mohan Roy, Swami Vivekananda, Sri Aurobindo engaging with Western ideas and articulating Hinduism for a new global context. You even see the incorporation of modern political and social philosophies, like the influential thought of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, engaging critically with traditional structures. It demonstrates this continuous thread, this ongoing evolution and adaptation.
It really is a continuous, living stream of thought, which brings up a really interesting question for you, the listener. How might these ancient, highly sophisticated frameworks for understanding reality, consciousness, knowledge itself, offer surprising new perspectives on our complex challenges today? Especially, as modern science, fields like quantum physics or even AI sometimes seem to echo or bump up against insights about interconnectedness or the nature of the observer that these traditions explored millennia ago. It makes you think, doesn't it? We've truly taken a deep dive today into the incredible breadth and depth of Indian philosophical traditions. We've looked at how they were classified, from Astika and Nastika to the Shaddarshanas and beyond, and how they evolved.
And we've really only just scratched the surface. Each of these schools we mentioned, Nyaya, Sankhya, Vedanta, Buddhism, Jainism, each one is an ocean in itself. That Sankhya school we highlighted. As one of the oldest and so foundational, it deserves its own deep exploration. There's always more to learn, more connections to make.
So, reflecting on all this, what's the takeaway for you? Maybe consider how that unique integration we started with the weaving together of philosophy, science, and theology, how that might offer a fresh lens for us today. In our modern world, we often tend to fragment knowledge into separate boxes. Perhaps, as these ancient thinkers suggested, true insight, maybe even a form of enlightenment, lies not just in analyzing the pieces, but in understanding how all knowledge, all existence, might ultimately be interconnected. Something to ponder.